My daughter invited my ex-wife to her wedding and forgot to invite me. But I was the one who paid for every year of her childhood, and what I did after that will make you question what love really means. The envelope came on a Wednesday. Plain, white, elegant, the kind of paper that smells expensive. The mailman looked confused when he handed it to me. "Must have been delivered to the wrong address," he said. He was right. The name on it wasn't mine. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Catherine Brooks. I froze. I hadn't seen that name written beside mine in 20 years. Still, curiosity won. I tore it open carefully, like a man opening a wound he already knew would bleed. Inside was a cream-colored wedding invitation with gold lettering. "You're cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Emily Brooks and Ryan Hale, hosted by Mrs. Catherine Brooks." I read it twice, once for disbelief, once for the knife that followed it. My daughter was getting married, and the woman hosting the wedding was my ex-wife. No mention of me, not even a late Mr. Brooks, just nothing, like I had never existed. I stared at her name, Catherine Brooks. She'd kept my last name all these years, worn it like a trophy, while she scrubbed me out of my own daughter's story. My phone sat on the counter. I dialed Emily's number from memory. It rang 4 times before it went to voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Call me back, okay? The beep cut me off. I didn't leave a second message. The room felt smaller after that. I walked to the window, the same one I'd watched her leave through at 16, luggage in hand, anger in her eyes, her mother waiting in the car. Back then, I thought she'd come back once she realized what Catherine really was. She never did. For years, I sent birthday cards, graduation gifts, letters. Sometimes she'd reply with a polite thank you, other times with silence, and eventually silence won. I wasn't the perfect father, but I never stopped showing up until she stopped answering. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the invitation in front of me, tracing the embossed edges with my thumb. Every detail screamed Catherine. The scripted font, the pretentious cordially, the location at some luxury vineyard I could never afford. I typed my daughter's name into the search bar, and there she was, Emily Brooks, daughter of philanthropist Catherine Brooks, to wed tech entrepreneur Ryan Hale. There were articles, interviews, photos. The headline read, "Local philanthropist to host her daughter's elegant wedding." And there she was, my ex-wife, smiling for the camera, draped in diamonds I probably helped pay for 20 years ago. I scrolled further. The caption said, "Catherine credits her journey as a single mother for inspiring her work in charity." Single mother. I almost laughed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "Funny," I whispered. "When I met her, she couldn't afford dinner." The next morning, I checked the mailbox again. Nothing but bills, no apology card, no correction, no, "Sorry, Dad, it must have been a mistake." So I read the invitation one more time, letting every word burn itself into memory. "You're cordially invited. Hosted by Mrs. Catherine Brooks." That line stuck in my throat like a splinter. 20 years ago, she left with nothing but a suitcase and a story. Now she was rewriting the ending, turning herself into the hero and me into the ghost. I poured myself a drink and stared at my reflection in the glass. I looked old. Not broken, just unfinished. And that's when it hit me. They hadn't just forgotten to invite me. They'd rewritten history, carved me out line by line until I was Nothing but a footnote in someone else's success story. But stories, even the clean ones, always have a missing page. I picked up the invitation again, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my coat pocket. They didn't just erase me from her wedding, I said quietly. They rewrote history, and I was about to edit it back. Catherine didn't leave me for another man. She left me for a cleaner story. And the truth she buried 20 years ago was about to crawl its way back to the surface. We were 24 when we built something from nothing. A small design company, 2 desks in a rented basement, and dreams bigger than either of us could handle. Catherine was brilliant, charismatic, charming, the kind of woman who could sell sunlight in a thunderstorm. I was the builder. She was the storyteller. We made a good team until the money ran out. It started slow, a few late payments, a client backing out, a loan we couldn't cover. But stress has a way of showing people who they really are. And Catherine, she didn't break. She adapted. One night she stayed up late typing. The next morning she handed me a stack of papers. "Just sign these," she said. "They'll help us restructure. The lawyer said it's standard." I didn't read them because I trusted her. A week later, I found out what I'd signed. A transfer of ownership, liability, and debt. Every penny owed, every loan, every failure, all under my name. When the company went under, she walked away spotless. I walked into bankruptcy court. The judge called it bad business. I called it what it was, betrayal. We lost the house. I slept in my truck for months. Meanwhile, Catherine reinvented herself. She cut her hair, changed her wardrobe, and changed her name. From partner to victim. Her new story sold beautifully. Young mother abandoned by reckless husband. It was the kind of narrative people love to believe. Simple, tragic, and easy to sympathize with. She moved in with a man named Douglas Hale, a banker with deep pockets and no sense of caution. 6 months later, they were married. 2 years after that, she was hosting charity events, giving interviews about resilience, holding my daughter's hand like a prop. I remember one article. The headline read, "From Struggle to Success, Catherine Brooks finds light after loss." Below it, a quote from her. "I survived because I had to. For my daughter." Her daughter. Not ours, just hers. I tried calling. Every number I had for her was disconnected, so I went to the house. The guards at the gate looked at me like I was trespassing on someone else's life. "Sir, you're not on the list," one said. I told him I'm her father. He didn't even flinch. "Not according to this list." I waited outside for hours that day, hoping Emily would see me through the window. She didn't. When I tried again, a week later, they sent someone to warn me, a lawyer in a tailored suit. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "you need to stop contacting them. Your presence is distressing to the family." The family. I'd been erased so cleanly. It was like I'd never existed. Years passed. I rebuilt what little I could. Worked construction, lived small, saved enough to survive. But every year on Emily's birthday, I'd send a card. Sometimes it came back unopened. Sometimes weeks later, I'd get a short reply in neat handwriting. "Please don't. It upsets Mom." That was all I got from my daughter. Secondhand guilt, neatly folded in an envelope. 20 years later, that guilt had grown into something else. Silence. And silence, when it lasts too long, starts to sound like truth. People around town forgot who I was. To them, Catherine was the successful one, the self-made woman. And me? I was the rumor, the failure, the shadow. But the thing about shadows is, they only exist when the light hits right. One night I sat in the old diner we used to go to after long workdays. The waitress recognized me. "You still come here?" she asked. "Catherine used to talk about this place all the time. Said you two built everything from scratch." I nodded. "Yeah, from scratch." Then she took the recipe. She laughed awkwardly, not knowing what else to say. When she walked away, I pulled an old photo from my wallet. The three of us, smiling in front of the office we built. Emily was 6, missing a tooth, holding both our hands. I stared at Catherine's face, confident, composed, calculating even then. That's when it clicked. She hadn't just left me for money or for security. She'd left me for narrative control. She didn't want a husband. She wanted a headline. Catherine didn't leave me for another man. She left me for a cleaner story. I thought about the way Emily smiled in her wedding photo. That same polished public smile her mother wore in every interview. The same practiced perfection. And I realized she didn't just inherit her mother's looks. She inherited her lies. I clenched the photo, the edges cutting into my palm. Catherine had buried me once, professionally, financially, emotionally. But what made her dangerous wasn't that she buried the truth. It was that she replanted it, carefully, in someone else's heart. Emily grew up watering that lie, feeding it, believing it, and Catherine called it love. "She didn't just bury the truth," I said quietly to myself. "She planted it in my daughter's heart and called it love." The waitress returned with the bill. "You okay, sir?" I folded the photo back into my wallet, my voice steady. "Yeah," I said. "I'm just remembering the day she started digging. They say time heals, but lies don't age. They just rot quietly. And the one I found buried 20 years deep still had her fingerprints on it. It started with a voice I hadn't heard in decades. Elliot? Elliot Brooks?" I turned around in the hardware store, and there he was. Mark Hanley, our company's old accountant. He looked older, thinner, but the guilt in his eyes hadn't aged a day. "God, it's really you," he said, voice trembling. "I didn't think you were still in town." I gave a bitter smile. "Most people don't." He hesitated before speaking again. You should have fought harder back then. You didn't deserve what happened." That stopped me cold. For 20 years, I'd lived with the assumption that everyone believed Catherine's story, that I was the reckless one who ruined everything. Hearing someone doubt it felt like oxygen after years underground. I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Mark glanced around, lowering his voice. "Not here. Meet me tonight. There's something I need to show you." We met at a diner on the edge of town, the kind where secrets feel safe. The place was half empty, buzzing with the faint hum of an old neon sign. Mark slid a worn leather folder across the table. His hands shook. "I should have come to you sooner," he said quietly. "I was young, scared. Catherine made me believe she'd destroy my career if I talked." I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, audit reports, and a series of signed authorizations, all dated the year before the company went under. "Look closely," he said. My eyes scanned the pages. Then I froze. Every authorization form had my name, my signature on it. But the signature wasn't mine. Mark nodded slowly. "She forged them." I felt the room tilt. She moved company funds into a private account under her maiden name. When the debts caught up, she handed everything to you. The liability transfer you signed? She'd already gutted the account by then. You never had a chance. My throat tightened. And you knew? He looked down ashamed. She said it was just temporary, that she'd fix it once the new investor came in. Then the business folded, and she threatened to ruin me if I spoke up. I leaned back, staring at the papers again. The ink had faded, but the truth burned bright. She didn't just steal the money, I said slowly. She stole the story. Mark wasn't finished. He pulled one more document from his folder, a corporate insurance policy yellowed with age. This was your life insurance, part of the company's employee coverage. She was the beneficiary. I frowned. That policy got canceled when we went bankrupt. He shook his head. No, she cashed it out 6 months before that, about $200,000. I went silent. Elliot, he continued softly, that's how she started her new business. The same one she used to rebuild her reputation. You were the investment she cashed out. The words hit harder than any fist. All those years she'd played the victim, the single mother who survived the storm. She'd done it using my name, my money, and my ruin. I stared at the papers until the lines blurred. It wasn't anger that came next. It was clarity. So she built her empire on my name, I whispered, and my destruction. Mark nodded. I'm sorry, I just couldn't carry it anymore. I folded the documents neatly, slid them back into the folder, and stood. Thank you, I said. You just gave me something I didn't have for 20 years. What's that? The truth. Outside, the night air was cold. I walked to my truck, sat in silence, and stared at the folder on the seat beside me. For 2 decades, I'd blamed myself. Now I had proof it was never my failure. It was her design. Every ruined year, every sleepless night, every letter returned unopened. All part of the story she wrote to keep her halo shining. I pulled out my phone and searched her name again. The internet painted her like a saint. Catherine Brooks, business leader, philanthropist, mother of the bride. There was even a new article titled Success, Strength, and Second Chances. The photo accompanying it stopped me. Catherine stood next to Emily, both in elegant gowns, both smiling. That same rehearsed, glossy smile. The caption read, Like mother, like daughter. I zoomed in on their faces. 2 generations of the same deception framed in perfect lighting. She looks just like her mother, I murmured. The same smile that hides a storm. I thought about taking the folder to the police. But this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about poetry. Catherine had rewritten my life into a tragedy to sell her own success. So I'd write the sequel, the one she couldn't control. I started the truck, the headlights slicing through the fog, my reflection barely visible in the glass. The man staring back wasn't the victim she created. He was the editor of the story she forgot to finish. And I was done reading her lies. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. But balance always demands payment. And after 20 years, the debt was due. It started with one phone call. Quiet, casual, calculated. Good afternoon, this is Elliot Brooks. I'm interested in purchasing local media holdings, I said, my voice steady. Technically, I wasn't lying. The company I targeted wasn't big, just a regional broadcasting group that handled small-town coverage, weddings, and social events. But it happened to be the one live streaming my daughter's wedding. The woman on the other end replied politely, Mr. Brooks, our current majority stakeholders looking to sell a portion of shares. How much are you looking to invest? 50%, I said, effective immediately. There was a pause. That's quite the offer, sir. I believe in timing, I told her, and timing, I thought, is all revenge really needs. A week later, I was sitting across from their CEO, a man who cared more about numbers than questions. I signed the transfer papers, wired the funds, and walked out as their newest silent partner. Ownership had its perks: access, authority, and most importantly, control over what would be broadcast to thousands of eyes that night. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing like a man laying traps in a field of lies. The documents Mark gave me, the forged signatures, the bank statements, the fake insurance transfer, became my script. I hired a small post-production team through a contact. I told them I was producing a documentary piece about the rise and fall of a business empire. They didn't ask whose. Money buys silence. We edited it into a short 3-minute sequence. Slow, deliberate, and merciless. Every detail authenticated, every image clear, every voice undeniable. At the end of the clip, my own voice narrated, "For 20 years, one woman wore a crown made of someone else's bones. Tonight she'll take it off." The last frame showed her smiling photo, pulled straight from her latest charity profile, followed by the words, "Catherine Brooks, the price of a perfect lie." By the time the footage was finished, everything else had fallen into place. Catherine had sponsored Emily's wedding, a grand event at the Whitestone Hotel, the most expensive venue in the county. Every local paper called it the Union of Love and Legacy. Legacy, the word she'd stolen from me. The event would be televised live, multiple camera crews, social media feeds, a live stream for donors and philanthropic partners. I'd make sure every single one of them saw what she really was. The day before the wedding, I drove to the hotel under an alias. The staff treated me with the kind of respect money commands. I walked through the ballroom where the ceremony would take place. Chandeliers glittering like glass icicles, tables draped in white silk, golden place cards embossed with the words, "A new beginning." I ran my hand along one of the tables, whispering under my breath, "No, this is an ending." In the production booth upstairs, I met the streaming crew. Corporate requested a backup file for tonight's show. I told them smoothly, "Use this one if the system glitches." The technician took the USB drive from me without question. To him, I was just another investor making sure the show ran perfectly. And it would. Just not for them. That night, I sat in my car across from the hotel, engine off, rain whispering against the windshield. Inside, I could see the ballroom glowing. A hive of activity, decorators arranging flowers, staff rehearsing cues, lights being tested. Through the glass doors, Catherine stood center stage, giving instructions like a queen overseeing her coronation. Still beautiful, still composed, still pretending. She laughed at something the planner said, that same carefully rehearsed laugh she'd used on talk shows for years. The sound of performance. Even from this distance, I could feel the same chill I'd felt 20 years ago when she'd smiled at me across a courtroom before taking everything. In the passenger seat beside me sat the folder Mark had given me, its papers now curled at the edges from use. I'd memorized every detail, every dollar she stole, every date she forged. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast. This was colder, cleaner. I'd spent half my life trying to prove my innocence. Now I was going to let her prove her guilt in front of everyone she'd fooled. I looked down at the small recorder in my hand, the one with my final voiceover, ready to play over the footage. I pressed it once, hearing my own voice echo quietly in the car. For 20 years, One woman wore a crown made of someone else's bones. Tonight she'll take it off. I smiled faintly. Perfect. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof like a heartbeat. Across the street, the marquee lights flickered on. Emily and Ryan. Forever starts here. I chuckled under my breath. Forever's about to have a rough start. I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes, replaying every moment that led here. The day Catherine handed me those papers, the courtroom, the lost birthdays, the unopened letters, the photo of Emily smiling beside her mother. Each memory had been a nail. And tomorrow I'd finish the coffin. At midnight, I turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed to life. I rolled down the window, letting the cold rain touch my face. Through the fogged glass of the hotel lobby, I saw Catherine again, shaking hands with the event manager, inspecting flowers, rehearsing perfection. She didn't look like a woman with secrets. But then again, neither did I. I whispered to myself, tomorrow I'll finally walk her down the aisle. Just not the way she planned. They called it a wedding. I called it Judgment Day. And what happened inside that ballroom, no one there will ever forget. The Whitestone Hotel had never looked so expensive. Crystal chandeliers dripped like icicles from the ceiling. A string quartet played soft classical notes, while waiters floated through the room like shadows in tuxedos. The press was everywhere, cameras flashing, microphones poised, every outlet wanting a piece of the Brooks legacy. At the center of it all stood Catherine, immaculate, untouchable, wearing a champagne gown that looked custom woven for power. Guests whispered words like graceful, resilient, inspiring. To them, she was the perfect story, the self-made woman who'd turned tragedy into triumph. Emily glowed beside her mother. I saw her through the live broadcast monitor in the control booth, a perfect reflection of Catherine at that age. The same poise, the same smile, the same blindness. The MC stepped onto the stage, voice booming through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin this beautiful ceremony, we'd like to honor a very special person, the woman who made all of this possible. Please welcome, it's Mrs. Catherine Brooks. Applause thundered. Catherine lifted her hand, tears glistening on cue. She's not crying. I whispered into the mic to no one in particular. She's rehearsing. The MC continued. And now, a short video tribute, a mother's journey. The house lights dimmed. The guests turned toward the towering LED screen. For a few seconds, it showed what they expected. Childhood photos of Emily, smiling birthdays, vacations, mother-daughter hugs. The music swelled, sentimental, manufactured. Then the screen flickered. The footage cut. The sound dropped to silence. And a new voice filled the room. Mine. For 20 years, Catherine Brooks lived as the woman who lost everything. Truth is, she stole it. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. The image shifted. Financial documents, signed authorizations, bank transfers. My forged signature, her real one. Emails, ledgers, the proof of her empire. Built from my ruin. Then came her voice, recorded from an old voicemail she'd left Mark years ago. Just clean the books, Mark. He'll take the fall. He always does. Her name, her tone, her guilt, echoing through a room of 100 witnesses. The camera caught her reaction live. Color draining, hands trembling, the mask cracking. Catherine looked to the control booth, eyes wide, panicked, searching. I was already walking toward the ballroom doors. The doors opened. Every head turned. The orchestra fell silent. I walked in wearing a black suit and a calmness she'd never seen before. For a moment, no one breathed. Even the cameras forgot to move. Emily was the first to speak, voice barely a whisper. "Dad?" Catherine staggered back, her glass slipping from her hand, shattering on the marble. You're ruining everything." I stopped halfway down the aisle, met her eyes, and said softly, "No. You ruined me first." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, the same one I'd kept for weeks, filled with the originals. I handed it to Emily. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, the forged documents, the transfer receipts, her mother's signature beside mine. Everything laid bare. Her lips parted. "Mom, is this real?" Catherine's voice broke. "Emily, I can explain." But the room wasn't listening anymore. Reporters whispered. Guests exchanged horrified glances. The truth was louder than her excuses. I turned toward the guests, my voice low but steady. For years, I was the villain in her story, the reckless husband, the failure. But stories only work if no one checks the ending. Tonight, I'm rewriting mine. Then to Catherine, I said, "You wanted a stage. Now you have one. Tell them how you built your empire." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, hands shaking, eyes darting between me and the flashing cameras. Tears spilled down her face. Not from guilt, but from the realization that the story was no longer hers to tell. Emily stared at her mother for a long moment, then at me. Tears welled up, confusion and heartbreak colliding in her expression. "Dad," she whispered, "I didn't know." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I came back." For a second, she looked like the little girl I used to know. Before the lies, before the distance, before her mother taught her how to smile through betrayal. I touched her shoulder gently, then stepped back. The cameras kept rolling. The silence was absolute. I turned toward the exit. Every step echoed like a verdict. No one tried to stop me, not the security, not the press, not even Catherine. Behind me, I could hear her sobbing. Behind her, the faint hum of reporters whispering headlines already being born. Outside, the night had turned to rain. Cold, relentless, cleansing. I stood beneath the hotel's glowing sign. The word forever, now flickering in broken light. The reflection of the ballroom shimmered across the puddles at my feet. In it, I saw myself, older, steadier, free. I didn't smile, I didn't need to. I whispered to the rain. I didn't return for revenge. I returned to remind them, you can rewrite stories, but not the truth. Then I walked away, the sound of thunder rolling behind me, drowning out the last applause of a life finally corrected. They buried me in lies. I let them live in truth.